Hello and welcome to another discussion in the series regarding mergers and acquisitions, which is being presented by the San Diego corporate law firm of George P. Shenas, Incorporated. I'm George Shenas, and today it's my privilege to be joined by two gentlemen who I've been involved with for some time, who happen to each be chief executive officers of their latest company, and also with respect to a number of companies that have preceded that have been involved on either the buy side or the sell side of M&A, merger and acquisition transactions. Gary Gist, to my right, is the chairman of a company which has recently concluded its activities called Palomar Companies. That company was the holding company for 5 business units that were acquired from Hughes Aircraft in 1995. Gary is now the chairman of the Board of Intersil Corporation, which is a NASDAQ company involved in technology products. Bob Brendel, to the left, is the outgoing president of T-Systems International, which is a company that has recently been sold in the latter part of 2008 to the John Deere Corporation. Bob's experience also involves being a CEO and an owner in some instances of companies that have principally been on the sell side of M&A transactions. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George.
Gentlemen, we're going to jump right into the topic today, and my efforts are going to be focused on trying to ask you to share your experiences as CEOs, as either on the buy side or the sell side of transactions of some importance in each case. Let's start with you, Gary. In 1995, you were successful in arranging, negotiating, and closing an acquisition, as I mentioned earlier, of a number of business units from Hughes Aircraft Corporation that resulted in the formation of the Palomar Companies. A number of those were based in San Diego, but they were also in Orange County and up in Canada, as I recall. That was a transaction that was very significant in scope. It must have required a lot of preparation. What steps did you take that resulted in the success of that particular effort?
Well, I think one of the most important steps that we took was sort of early on, and it's a preceding step. As an owner of a business or as a potential acquirer of a business, you really need to have your contacts in the investment banking community already in place. You can't show up on day one and and try to get somebody to join you and loan you $100 million to buy something. It's very difficult to make relationships and to meet people and really gain trust. I was fortunate, having gone through an IPO process prior to the Hughes deal, and so therefore knew quite a few individuals in the investment banking community, had established a level of credibility and trust being very important. So when I approached Hughes about this acquisition, we looked very professional, we looked very competent, and we were able to convince them that in fact we had assembled a team that could pull off an acquisition of this size with a company like the Hughes Aircraft Company.
Now, at that time, what was Hughes' motivation in spinning off these entities? Why were they?
Well, you can recall back in '95, it was after the Gulf War, and Hughes Aircraft was going through a difficult time, the downsizing from the industrial and military spending budget. They had brought in a new CEO, Mike Armstrong, and his job was really to get the company up and running, more profitable, more commercial, and really transition the company. As part of that, he made a decision that this company really had too many units that didn't fit with their core values or their core business plan. And this was one of those companies. And in fact, the 5 companies that we bought really weren't related to each other in any way. They weren't the same markets, not the same products, totally separate. So they really didn't fit with themselves, much less fitting with Hughes Aircraft Company.
And looking at it from the seller side, which you've had a good deal of experience, I think you've been involved in the sale of 4 or 5 businesses here as a CEO. What steps do you think a prospective seller needs to do in order to position itself so that it is more attractive to the type of buyer that Gary's talking about?
Well, first they need to be able to identify and define what their core value is for the company. In order to do that, they really need to take a look at their current situation, do a situation analysis, the normal SWOT and strengths and weakness analysis. But more than that, they need to look at different scenarios. As Gary mentioned, in today's market, you have a number of different potential scenarios where you can get into a much more advanced recession or even a bordering on a depression. So you have to be able to look at your core values as they relate to a number of different scenarios that are potentially going to happen in today's markets. Once you've identified those, you need to be able to look at whether you have listed objectivity into that analysis. As a CEO or an owner of a company, many times you have an emotional support factor into that analysis, and you need to get some objectivity, whether it's from your corporate M&A attorney advisor or an investment banker, and also your board.
Now, when you're looking at core values and defining core values, is it occasionally necessary to strip out the non-essentials to go back to basic core values?
Absolutely.
Particularly if you're trying to sell a product.
Right.
Or sell a company, rather.
Many times. When you look at whether your core value is a product, you may look at whether the ability to strip out marginal products enhances your value. The other aspect is what you thought was a core value may be a product, maybe isn't, because your core value is really your distribution or your footprint on a global market. So you have to be very, very objective and very brutal in how you assess your value, because the buyer is going to come in and do the same thing to you in terms of how they analyze your business. And you have to be able to answer all those questions and have it come across as a completely transparent operation in terms of the value.
Yeah. I have a client now, for example, who believes they're in a certain business, but their greatest strength is a fabulous distribution network, from their distributors down to their dealers, down to the installers and the support team throughout the world.
Absolutely.
And the ability for that buyer to capitalize on that, or conversely, a seller to say to that buyer, look, I have a compatible product that may not be within your product line, but is readily distributable through that network, is a great way to put together potentially buyers and sellers who might not otherwise recognize themselves as being synergistic.
Absolutely. And as Gary mentioned, one of the drivers that he would look at is growth. And you may have average products, but if you have that growth potential because of global distribution, you fit his need.
Yeah. Let's interrupt the session at this point, gentlemen. I know there's a lot more that we want to discuss, and I want to add that to an additional session in the near future. Thank you.